Captain Elias Thorne gripped the armrests of his command chair as the alert klaxons blared across the bridge of the Retribution. "All hands, battle stations," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos like a laser. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the hulking form of the Xipheron cruiser blocking their path through the asteroid field, its energy shields pulsing with ominous blue light. Lieutenant Mira Voss, his tactical officer, spun in her seat, fingers flying over the console. "Sir, they're hailing us, demanding we surrender our cargo hold, says it's tribute, owed to the Council of Stars." Her tone carried the edge of sarcasm she reserved for bureaucrats, but her eyes were sharp, calculating escape vectors. Thorne leaned forward, jaw set. The Retribution was no warship. It was a colony hauler, packed with the last seeds of humanity's expansion into the fringes. He'd fought tooth and nail to get this shipment past the blockades, and no alien council was going to seize it without a fight. "Patch them through. Let's hear their terms," the comms crackled, and a holographic figure materialized. A towering Xipheron enforcer, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under artificial lights. Multiple eyes blinking in unison. "Human vessel, you encroach on protected space. Your primitive drives pollute our trade lanes. Surrender the tribute or be harvested for parts." Voss snorted softly beside him. "Harvested? They sound like they watched too many old vids." Thorne ignored the quip, his mind racing. The asteroid field offered cover, but one wrong maneuver and they'd be pulverized. Enforcer were neutral traders. No tribute owed. Stand down or we'll consider this an act of piracy. The hologram's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Neutrality is a myth in council space. Prepare to be boarded. The transmission cut and weapons locks pinged across their sensors. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7, Thorne ordered, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. Ensign Raj Patel, the young navigator, nodded grimly and banked the ship hard, thrusters firing in bursts to weave between tumbling rocks the size of skyscrapers. The Xipheron cruiser unleashed a salvo of plasma bolts, scorching the void where the Retribution had been moments before. Alarms wailed as a glancing hit rattled the hull, sparks erupting from a nearby panel. Voss called out readings, gun shields at 72%. "They're faster than they look, closing on our flank." Thorne's mind flashed to the colonists back in the hold, families counting on this run to rebuild after the core wars. Losing the cargo meant dooming them to starve on a barren rock. He couldn't let that happen. Divert auxiliary power to forward arrays. "Voss, target their propulsion vents, make 'em limp." She complied, her hands a blur. The Retribution's railguns hummed to life, spitting kinetic slugs that punched through the cruiser's shields in a shower of debris. But the enemy fired back, a tractor beam latching onto their hull with a metallic groan.
"We're caught!"
Patel shouted, fighting the controls. Thorne unstrapped, rising to his feet. "Not for long. Engineering, this is the captain. Reroute the waste recyclers to the beam emitter. Flood it with plasma residue." It was a long shot, improvised from half-remembered salvage tales, but human grit had always thrived on such gambles. Down in the bowels of the ship, Chief Mechanic Lena Kowalski wiped grease from her face and grinned fiercely at her team. "You heard the man. Let's give these bugs a taste of our garbage." Pipes groaned as they jury-rigged the lines, shunting the caustic slurry toward the docking clamps. On the bridge, the tractor beam flickered, sparks dancing along its energy field as the residue corroded the Xipheron tech. The cruiser lurched, its grip weakening. Thorne seized the moment. "Full burn, Patel, break free." The Retribution surged forward, snapping the failing beam like a frayed rope. But as they pulled away, a final plasma lance grazed their engine nacelle, venting atmosphere into the black. Voss reported the damage. "Propulsion compromised." "We're limping, sir, but alive." Thorne exhaled, watching the cruiser drift, trailing smoke. The council would hear of this and Retribution would come, but for now they'd bought time, and proven that humans didn't bow to demands. Thorne gripped the armrests of his command chair, the faint tremor of the Retribution's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen still showed the Xipheron cruiser fading into the void, its hull venting plumes of ionized gas that glittered against the stars. "Status on the nacelle?" he asked, his voice steady despite the acrid scent of scorched wiring creeping into the bridge air. Voss swiveled in her station, her fingers flying over the diagnostics panel. The engineer was all sharp angles, short-cropped hair, eyes narrowed behind wire-rimmed glasses that she'd scavenged from some pre-FTL junker. Cautious by nature, she hated surprises, and this breach was a nasty one. Hull integrity at 78%, Captain. The plasma grays melted through the outer shielding, but the inner baffles held. We're leaking atmo, but I can patch it with the emergency seals. Engines are down to 60% output. Enough to limp to the nearest jump point, but not much more. Patel, at the helm, shot a glance over his shoulder. The pilot's grin was lopsided, his dark beard flecked with sweat from the burn. Witty under fire, he thrived on the edge, always cracking wise to keep the tension from boiling over. 60%? That's my kind of odds. Beats the alternative, being the Council's new hood ornament. He adjusted the thrust vectors with a flick, the ship groaning in response as it steadied its course toward the flickering nav beacon of Epsilon Drift. Thorn nodded, unbuckling his harness to stand. He paced the narrow bridge, boots thudding softly against the grated floor. The retribution wasn't much. A refitted colony hauler with mismatched armor plates and a reactor that purred like an old cat. But she was theirs, crewed by humans who'd scraped together enough credits to chase the frontier dream, far from the Council's suffocating edicts. Tribute demands had hit hard last cycle, resources, tech, even personnel quotas. They'd refused, and now the Zephyron enforcers were on their tail. What's our ETA to the drift? And any sign of pursuit? 4 hours at this speed, Patel replied, his hands dancing over the controls. Sensors are clean for now, but that cruiser wasn't alone. Council's got patrols seeded through this sector like weeds. Voss snorted without looking up, rerouting power from non-essentials to the failing nacelle. Patrols, as if they need more than one to squash us. That slurry trick bought us this much. Diverting their waistlines into the tractor beam was a stroke of genius, Patel. Corroded the emitters just enough. Genius? Nah, desperation. Patel's laugh was short, edged with relief. Next time, remind me to pack better pranks. Thorne stopped at the engineering schematic, tracing the red alert line snaking across the display. The damage was a spiderweb of vulnerabilities. If the leak worsened, they'd lose pressure in the aft sections. Maybe even the cargo holds packed with their hard-won ore. No ore, no leverage against the next demand. He clenched his jaw. Prioritize the patch, Voss. Patel plotted evasive weave, nothing flashy, just enough to throw off any long-range scans. We're not outrunning them clean. We need to vanish. The ship shuddered again as a secondary alarm blared from the comms array. Voss slapped it silent, but her face tightened. Incoming tight beam from the drift. It's Mira. Says the station's picking up anomalous readings. Multiple signatures inbound bearing 270. Council's mobilizing a blockade. Thorne's pulse quickened, but he kept his tone level. How many? 3 cruisers minimum. Closing fast. Voss met his eyes, her caution bleeding into resolve. They're cutting off our exit. Patel whistled low. Home sweet scrap heap just turned into a kill box. Ideas, boss? Because punching through that sounds like suicide. Thorne leaned over the console, studying the stellar map. The drift was a neutral hub, a tumble of asteroid-mined habitats orbiting a gas giant. Lawless enough for humans to dock without questions, but the Council had been squeezing it too. A straight run would mean fighting through firepower they couldn't match. He traced a side vector toward the giant's rings. We don't punch, we ghost. Use the rings for cover. Magnetic interference will scramble their sensors. Voss, can you boost the stealth emitters? Overload them if you have to. She hesitated, calculating. The emitters were finicky human mods, jury-rigged from salvaged drone parts not built for sustained burn. Possible, but it'll fry the array after 10 minutes. We'd be blind and broadcasting our position like a flare. Better than dead. Patel cut in, already keying the course change. Rings it is. Hang on. This is gonna get bumpy. The Retribution banked hard, thrusters firing in staccato bursts as it veered toward the swirling bands of ice and dust. Thorne settled back into his chair, the weight of command pressing like gravity. They'd escaped once through grit and a mad gamble, but the Council wasn't forgiving. Retribution was coming, and the rings might buy them a breath or swallow them whole. Alarms wailed anew as the first debris field loomed, shards of ancient comet glinting like knives in the shadow. Patel's hands blurred on the yoke, dodging a fist-sized rock that pinged off the hull. Too close, he muttered. These rings are thicker than I remember. Push through, Thorne ordered. Voss, status on that patch? Seals holding, barely. She wiped sweat from her brow, the bridge lights casting harsh shadows on her determined face. A spark jumped from a console and she cursed under her breath, slamming a panel shut. The Atmo leak hissed faintly behind the bulkhead, a reminder of their precarious state. Thorn gripped the armrest, eyes fixed on the viewport where the rings churned like a cosmic grinder. The ship's engines thrummed, protesting the weave through the debris, but Patel held steady, his jaw set in that unyielding line she'd come to rely on. "Another cluster incoming, starboard," Patel said, voice clipped. His fingers danced over the controls, firing micro-thrusters to nudge them clear. A chunk of ice the size of a shuttle grazed past, tumbling end over end, its surface etched with craters from forgotten impacts. Voss straightened from her console, tools clinking against her belt. Leaks worsening. Pressure dropping in the aft section. Could lose containment if we take one more hit. She didn't wait for orders, already prying open an access panel with a hiss of escaping steam. Sparks danced in the dim light, illuminating the grease streaks on her face. "Options?" Thorn asked, scanning the tactical display. The Council's pursuit signatures blinked red, closing the gap despite the ring's interference. They were buying time, but not enough. Patel glanced back, sweat beading on his forehead. "We could slingshot around that big fragment ahead. Use its gravity to swing wide. Risky, but it might shake the tails." Voss snorted, soldering a wire with quick, precise flicks. "Risky? That's your department word for suicide. Hull's down to 60% integrity. One wrong move and we're confetti." Thorn waited, the hum of the ship vibrating through his bones. The rings weren't just obstacles. They were a graveyard of old wrecks, silent testaments to crews who'd pushed too hard. But surrender wasn't in their blood. "Do it, Voss. Reinforce what you can. We adapt or we die." Patel nodded, banking hard. The deck tilted, gravity compensators whining as they plunged toward the massive rock, a jagged monolith spinning lazily in the void. Alarms blared, proximity warning, and Thorn braced as the ship skimmed its edge, the pull yanking them into a wild arc. Debris pelted the shields like hail, each impact a dull thud that echoed through the frame. Voss cursed, her torch flaring as she sealed a new breach, the acrid smell of molten metal filling the bridge. "They're matching our vector," Patel reported, voice tight. "Closing fast, estimate 2 minutes to weapons range." Thorn's mind raced. The Council's ships were sleek, efficient, built for open space dominance, not this chaotic ballet. Humans, though, they improvised. "Voss, can we vent something to mask our trail? Decoys?" Voss paused, eyes narrowing. "Cargo bay's got those spare fuel cells. Rig 'em to blow low-yield, scatter chaff. It'll look like we're venting drive plasma. Buy us a blind spot." "Make it happen." Thorn turned to Patel. "Hold this course till she does, then punch us through the inner ring. Thinner field there, but faster exit." The ship shuddered as another rock clipped the wing, lights flickering. Voss bolted from the bridge, her boots pounding the corridor. Thorn watched the readouts, heart steady despite the chaos. They'd stolen this freighter from under the Council's nose months ago, turned it into a ghost in the black. Tribute? They'd give them nothing but echoes. A muffled boom reverberated from aft, Voss's handiwork. The tactical pinged, pursuit signatures scattering, confused by the debris bloom. "Got 'em," Patel said, a grim smile cracking his face. He twisted the yoke, diving into the inner ring's sparser hazards. Shards whipped by, smaller but faster, like needles in a storm. Voss's voice crackled over comms. "Decoys deployed. Hull holding, for now. But that leak's eating our air. We need a dock soon or we're breathing vacuum." Thorn exhaled, the tension easing a fraction. The rings spat them toward open space, the Council's lights fading in the rear sensors. But the cost lingered. A ship on the brink, a crew running on fumes. Retribution wasn't just coming for them. It was what they'd deliver, one desperate gambit at a time. Patel straightened, the stars steadying ahead. "Clear for now." "What's next, Captain?" "Next," Thorn said, voice firm. "We hit back." Thorn gripped the armrests as the Retribution shuddered into the asteroid field's edge, the nav computer beeping warnings about unstable debris. "Patel, plot a course for that derelict station on the fringe. It's our best shot at repairs before the Council's patrols sniff us out." Patel nodded, fingers flying over the console, his cautious eyes scanning the holographic display. The field loomed like a graveyard of shattered moons, chunks of rock tumbling in lazy orbits that could pulverize their hull if they misjudged a turn. "Aye, Captain. But it's a ghost, abandoned since the last war. Scanners show power signatures, faint ones. Could be squatters or automated defenses." Voss leaned back from her engineering station, wiping sweat from her brow with a grease-streaked rag. Witty under pressure she always was, but her voice carried an edge now. Or just ghosts? Leaks at 20%. We're venting Atmo like a sieve. If we don't patch her soon, we'll be the ones haunting this field. The ship lurched as a micrometeor pinged off the shields, sparks dancing across the viewport. Thorn felt the vibration in his bones, a reminder of how thin their margin had grown since the Council's blockade. They'd slipped the noose back at the rings, but retribution meant more than evasion. It meant turning the tables, scavenging what they could to strike deeper into enemy space. Helm steady. Voss, prep the docking clamps. We'll make it work. Patel eased the throttle, weaving through a narrow gap where two boulders the size of freighters grazed past each other. The derelict station resolved on the screens, a skeletal lattice of girders and domes, half swallowed by drifting ice and dust, its solar arrays fractured like broken teeth. No hails, no targeting locks, just silence, broken by the hum of their failing life support. Docking in 5, Patel announced, his voice tight. The Retribution aligned with a gaping airlock, thrusters firing in precise bursts. A jolt rocked them as the clamps engaged, the ship groaning in protest. Alarms blared, hull stress at critical. Voss was already moving, toolkit in hand. I'm suiting up. Thorn, you and Patel cover me from the bridge. If anything twitches out there, light it up. Thorn unstrapped, grabbing his sidearm. Not without me. Patel, you're on guns. Keep the engines hot, we might need to bolt. The airlock cycled with a hiss, equalizing pressure that smelled of stale ozone and neglect. Voss led the way into the station's dim corridors, her suit lights cutting through the gloom. Floating debris bumped against their boots, loose panels, frozen cables, remnants of whoever had last walked these halls. Thorn swept his beam ahead, heart pounding in the suit's confines. Scans clear so far, Voss murmured over the comm. But that power hum, it's coming from the core reactor. If we can hotwire it, we might siphon enough juice to seal our breach. They rounded a corner into what had been the engineering bay, the reactor's faint blue glow pulsing like a dying heart. Consoles flickered erratically, and Thorn's light caught something, a shadow shifting behind a bulkhead. Not debris, a figure, armored, emerging with a weapon raised. Contact! Thorn barked, diving behind a crate as plasma bolts scorched the air. Voss rolled opposite, her welder sparking to life as an improvised shield. The attacker fired again, the shots wild but relentless. Intruders! This scrap's claimed! A gravelly voice snarled through a translator. Pirate, not council, but no friendlier. More shadows detached from the walls. 3, 4 of them, closing in with scavenged rifles. Patel's voice crackled from the ship. Bridge has eyes on you, firing warning shots, get clear. Explosions rattled the station as the Retribution's turrets peppered the exterior, shaking loose girders. One pirate yelped, tumbling into 0G. Thorn seized the moment, popping up to nail another in the shoulder plate. The figure spun away, cursing in some fringe dialect. Voss didn't hesitate. She lunged for the reactor panel, prying it open with a crowbar while Thorn laid cover fire. Sparks flew as she bypassed the safeties, rerouting power through jury-rigged lines. Almost, come on, you beauty. A pirate charged her, blade drawn. Thorn tackled him mid-leap, the impact sending them both crashing into a console. Fists flew in the weightless brawl, helmets cracking against metal. The pirate's strength was brute, alien physiology giving him leverage, but Thorn twisted, slamming his elbow into the visor until it spiderwebbed. Voss's line connected with a surge. Lights blazed to life, emergency fields snapping on to pin the remaining foes. Power flowing. Patching the ship now. Hold them. Patel whooped over comms. They're scattering. Got 2 more inbound from the far docks. Council scouts by the signatures. Thorn pinned his opponent, zip-tying the arms with a spare cable. The station trembled as the Retribution drank in the energy, her systems stabilizing. But the scouts were closing fast, their drives flaring on the external cams. Back to the ship, Thorn ordered, hauling Voss toward the airlock. Alarms wailed, docking clamps straining against the incoming fire. They sealed the hatch just as the first scout's beam grazed the hull. Patel disengaged with a roar of thrusters, the Retribution breaking free into the field's chaos. Voss slumped into her seat, monitoring the seals. Breach patched. We're airtight again, but that reactor's on borrowed time. We took what we could. Thorne watched the station recede, pirates and scouts converging in a deadly dance behind them. Retribution demanded more than survival. It carved paths through the void, one desperate cut at a time. Thorne gripped the armrest as the Retribution shuddered, her patchwork hull protesting the hard burn from the plasma drive. The viewscreen fractured the starfield into jagged shards, scout signatures blooming like angry fireflies on the tactical overlay. Patel, weave us through that debris field ahead. Buy us time. Copy that, Patel replied, fingers dancing over the controls. The ship lurched, thrusters firing in staccato bursts to dodge a tumbling chunk of asteroid. Voss leaned forward in her station, eyes narrowed at the reactor readouts. The stolen energy hummed through the conduits, a temporary balm, but the gauges flickered, overloaded relays sparking virtual warnings. They're matching our vector, Voss said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Those scouts are lighter. They'll cut us off if we don't shake them. Thorne nodded, mind racing. The Council scouts weren't just hunters, they were enforcers, programmed for precision takedowns. No mercy in their code. The Retribution had been a smuggling rig once, hauling contraband through the fringes, but now she was their lifeline, scarred from too many close calls. He scanned the nav charts, spotting a faint anomaly in the debris, a forgotten mining outpost, half buried in the rock. Patel, adjust course to grid 4712, that old rig might give us cover. The pilot didn't question it. The ship dove, engines whining as they skimmed the asteroid's craggy surface. A scout's beam lanced past, vaporizing a nearby boulder into a spray of molten droplets that pinged against the hull like hail. Voss cursed under her breath, rerouting power to shields, but the influx from the heist was already destabilizing the grid. Shields at 62%, she reported. If they hit us again, we're venting atmosphere. Thorne unstrapped, moving to the engineering console beside her. His hands, calloused from years of wrenching on rigs, joined hers in the diagnostics. Talk to me. Can we vent the auxiliary tanks? Use the exhaust as a decoy? Voss paused, calculating. Her cautious nature usually kept her glued to protocols, but desperation sharpened her focus. Risky. Could overload the main drive, but yeah. It'll look like we're blowing a core breach. Do it. Thorne keyed the sequence, watching the valves cycle. A plume erupted from the Retribution's stern, a brilliant flare of ionized gas mimicking a catastrophic failure. The scouts hesitated, their formation tightening as sensors fed them false data. Patel whooped softly. They're peeling off to flank what they think is our wreck. We've got a window, straight shot to the outpost. The ship surged forward, slipping into the debris shadow. Thorne exhaled, but the victory felt thin. The reactor's hum deepened to a growl, warning lights pulsing. Voss wiped her forehead, traits of her meticulous side shining through as she cross-checked seals. That buy us distance, but we're bleeding efficiency. We need a real fix soon, or the Council's got us dead to rights. They closed on the outpost, a skeletal lattice of girders and dormant drills clinging to the asteroid like a mechanical parasite. Patel eased them into a docking cradle, clamps engaging with a metallic groan. No welcoming lights, just the cold void and the faint echo of pursuit on long-range scans. Thorne stood first, grabbing a toolkit from the bulkhead. Voss, you're with me. We scavenge what we can. Parts, fuel cells, anything to patch the reactor. Patel, keep her hot. If those scouts circle back, you bug out with or without us. Understood, Patel said, her witty edge cutting through the tension. Just don't turn this into another suicide run. I've got plans after this gig. Voss shouldered her own pack, brave resolve hardening her features. She wasn't one for bravado, but her actions spoke, double-checking the airlock seals before cycling it open. The two stepped into the outpost's dim corridor, emergency strips flickering to life under their boots. Dust motes swirled in the low gravity, the air stale with disuse. Scans show powers offline, Voss murmured, sweeping her light across rusted panels. But there might be residual cells in the core room. They moved methodically, Thorn prying open a junction box while Voss interfaced her datapad with a terminal. Sparks flew from his efforts, illuminating graffiti scratched into the metal, names of miners long gone, tales of strikes that never panned out. A distant rumble shook the structure, the asteroid shifting, or worse, the scouts probing closer. "Got something," Voss said, her voice tight. The pad beeped, unlocking a storage vault. Inside, rows of capacitors gleamed, dusty but intact. These could stabilize us, but hauling them back... An alarm blared from Thorn's comm. Patel's voice crackled through. "Captain, scouts inbound, 2 minutes out. They're not buying the decoy anymore." Thorn hefted a crate, muscles straining. "Voss, grab what you can. Double time it." She nodded, stuffing components into her pack, her cautious checks abandoned for raw speed. They bolted back toward the airlock, the outpost groaning around them as vibrations intensified. A beam struck nearby, the asteroid fracturing with a thunderous crack, debris shearing off, tumbling toward the Retribution. "Patel, prep for emergency. Undock!" Thorn shouted, sealing the hatch behind them. The ship tore free just as the scouts crested the horizon, lasers stitching the void. Voss slammed into her seat, already splicing wires. "Strap in. This is going to be bumpy." The Retribution spiraled away, the outpost exploding in a silent bloom of rock and fire. Thorn watched the rear cams, the scouts veering to pursue. They'd gained parts, but the cost lingered. A narrower margin, the void closing in. Survival demanded more than luck. It forged them sharper, one evasion at a time. Thorn gripped the armrests as the Retribution shuddered, inertial dampeners straining against the erratic thrust. "Voss, give me options, fast. Those scouts are closing, and I don't like the readings on our aft shields." Voss's fingers danced over the jury-rigged console, sparks flickering from exposed circuits. She wiped sweat from her brow, eyes narrowing at the holographic display. "Shields at 40%, Captain. We've got debris from the outpost masking us for now, but they're vectoring in. Best bet. Slingshot around that gas giant ahead. Use its gravity to shake them, but it'll stress the engines. Patel, you good for that?" In the engineering alcove, Patel grunted, his voice crackling over the intercom. "As good as I can be with half the parts we scavenged. Diverting power from life support to mains. It'll get cold in here, but we'll pull it off." He paused, the hum of welding tools underscoring his words. "Just don't push her into redline too long." The bridge lights dimmed as power shifted, the ship's hull creaking like an old bone under pressure. Thorn nodded, plotting the course with quick taps. "Execute. Patel, keep her together. Voss, monitor their comms. See if you can jam their targeting." Alarms blared softly in the background, a persistent whine that matched the tension coiling in Thorn's gut. The gas giant loomed on the view screen, its swirling bands of orange and red swallowing stars. The Retribution dove toward it, engines flaring blue against the black. Voss leaned forward, splicing a makeshift jammer into the array. "Jamming active, but it's crude. They're hailing us, council frequency." "Want me to patch it through?" Thorn's jaw tightened. "No. Let them chase ghosts." He watched the rear feed. The 2 scout ships, sleek council predators with angular hulls, adjusted course, their laser arrays glowing faintly. One veered closer, probing with a sensor sweep that lit up their proximity alerts. The ship bucked as they entered the giant's gravitational pull, G-forces pressing them into their seats. Voss cursed under her breath, stabilizing the spin. "They're matching us. Damn, they're good. If we don't lose them in the rings..." Patel broke in, his tone edged with strain. "Engine's holding, but we've got a coolant leak. I can patch it, but it'll take time we don't have. Captain, your call? Full burn now or risk it in the atmosphere skim?" Thorn's mind raced, weighing the odds. A full burn would outpace the scouts but drain their reserves, leaving them dead in the void later. The skim was riskier, flirting with the planet's turbulent clouds, but it might buy them cover. "Skim it is. Voss, plot the dive. Patel, seal what you can and brace." The Retribution plunged deeper, the view screen filling with the roiling atmosphere. Turbulence rattled loose panels, and Voss's console sparked again, forcing her to reroute manually. Turbulence spiking, holding trajectory. She glanced at Thorn, her usual wit subdued by the grind. "If this works, drinks are on me when we hit port." A laugh escaped Thorn despite the chaos. "Deal. Just make sure we hit a port with air." The ship groaned, layers of cloud enveloping them in a hazy veil. On the rear cams, the scouts hesitated. one firing a warning shot that glanced off the interference. Then the lead scout dove after them, cutting through the upper clouds like a knife. Its lasers lanced out, scoring the Retribution's flank, a glancing hit that severed an external sensor array. Alarms wailed anew, red lights bathing the bridge. "Direct hit!" Voss shouted, fingers flying to compensate. Shields dropping to 20. "Patel, on it!" Patel's voice boomed back. "Rerouting emergency power. Give me 30 seconds. Thorne yanked the controls, rolling the ship to evade. The cockpit spun, stars and clouds blurring. The scout closed, its silhouette sharp against the glow. Another shot brewed, charging with a high-pitched whine over their scanners. Voss slammed a fist on her panel, improvising. Overloading their sensor feed, bouncing our debris signature back at them. The jammer pulsed, and for a heartbeat the scout's course faltered, veering into a denser cloud bank. The Retribution emerged from the skim on the far side, battered but intact, the gas giant receding. The scouts, disoriented, broke off, their signatures fading into the system's clutter. Thorne exhaled, slumping slightly. "Good work. Status?" Voss scanned the readouts, her face pale but resolute. "Engine stable, shields recharging slow. But we lost that sensor, blind spot aft now." "And Patel?" From below, Patel's voice weary but steady. "Leak sealed. We're down to 80% efficiency. Close call, Captain." The bridge fell quiet, the hum of systems the only sound. Thorne stared at the stars ahead, the void stretching endless. One evasion down, but the Council's net felt tighter, their retribution just beginning to unfold. Thorne gripped the armrests of his chair, the worn leather creaking under his fingers as the Retribution's engines thrummed a steady rhythm through the hull. The stars wheeled past the viewport, indifferent witnesses to their flight, but he could almost feel the Council's patrols closing in like shadows in the void. "Helm, plot us a course for the Epsilon drift," he said, his voice cutting through the bridge's hum. "We need cover, and fast." Voss nodded, her fingers dancing over the console, but her eyes flicked to the aft sensors, or where they should have been. "Captain, with the blind spot, we'll be flying half-def. If they loop around—" She trailed off, the implication hanging heavy. "Risk we take," Thorne replied, pushing to his feet. He paced to the tactical display, where red blips marked the scouts' last known positions. Fading but not gone. Patel's patch job on the engines had bought them time, but time was a currency they were burning fast. The Council had demanded tribute from the outer colonies, resources stripped bare under the guise of Alliance protection, and when the humans of New Terra refused, ships like the Retribution became the punchline to their defiance. Now Retribution was their only reply. A chime from the comms shattered the focus. "Incoming transmission encrypted," announced Reyes from the auxiliary station, his voice tight. The young engineer wiped sweat from his brow, his usual easy grin replaced by a grim set to his jaw. "Source?" Thorne asked, striding over. Freelancer relay bouncing off a neutral buoy. "Could be a trap or an ally." Thorne waited in a heartbeat. "Decrypt and play it." Static crackled, then a voice emerged, gravelly, laced with the faint accent of the core worlds. "Retribution, this is Ghost Runner. If you're who I think, you've stirred the hive. Council's got a blockade at Epsilon, 3 cruisers minimum. But there's a gap. Old mining route, asteroid choked. Tight squeeze, but your kind built for it." Thorne's mind raced. Ghost Runner. A smuggler's call sign whispered in black market dens. Risky, but ignoring it meant stumbling blind into the net. "Why tip us off?" A chuckle dry as vacuum. "Council squeezed my roots dry last cycle. Consider it payback. Coordinates incoming. Don't get slagged before you make 'em pay." The line cut, and Voss punched in the data. The holographic map shifted, revealing a jagged path through the drift's debris field, a labyrinth of tumbling rocks and derelict hulks from forgotten extractors. "It's viable," she said, "but one wrong nudge and we're scrap. Engines at 80% won't handle the maneuvers clean." Patel emerged from the access hatch below, his jumpsuit smeared with hydraulic fluid, tools clinking at his belt. "We make it handle. I've got ideas for a boost. Reroute auxiliary power to thrusters, but it'll tax the core. Might fry something if we push too hard." Thorne met his gaze, seeing the spark there, the same grit that had patched them through the skim. "Do it. Reyes, you with him?" "Aye, Captain." Reyes stood, rolling his shoulders. "Let's show these rocks what human engineering can do." As the two ducked back into the bowels of the ship, Thorne returned to his station. The Retribution accelerated, The first asteroids looming like silent sentinels on the view screen. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the debris ahead. Voss called out adjustments, her commands sharp and precise. Port 15, ease throttle. There's a spinner at Mark 27. The ship groaned as it threaded the needle, hull vibrations rattling loose panels. Thorne watched a chunk of ice the size of a shuttle shear past, close enough to fog the shields. They were in it now, the blockade's edge just beyond the field. But doubt gnawed. If Ghost Runner's intel was sour, this gamble could end them. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing across the bridge. Contacts! Voss shouted. 2 Council interceptors flanking from the outer rim. They've got our vector. Thorne's pulse hammered. Evasive pattern delta. By Patel time. The Retribution twisted, engines whining as it dodged a probing laser burst that scorched the void nearby. Voss fired countermeasures, chaff blooming like metallic snow, but the interceptors closed, their sleek forms cutting through the asteroids with predatory grace. Council tech, flawless and unforgiving. Shields at 60%, Voss reported, sweat beading on her forehead. They're herding us toward the blockade. Down in engineering, Patel's voice crackled over the intercom, breathless. Reroutes holding. Give us 30 seconds for the surge. Thorne clenched his jaw. 30 seconds in a kill box. All hands brace. Voss, take us deep. Use the rocks for cover. She complied, the ship plunging into a denser cluster. An asteroid clipped their flank, a jolt that sent sparks flying from consoles. The Retribution shuddered but held. Thorne imagined the Council's frustration, their precise formations disrupted by human desperation. The surge hit then, a raw burst of power that propelled them forward like a slingshot. Patel whooped over the comms, "We're clear." Engines green, hot but green. The interceptors faltered, one veering to avoid a collision, the other painting them with targeting locks too late. Voss looped them out of the field, the blockade's silhouettes resolving on the long-range scan. Hulking cruisers, tribute enforcers waiting to claim their due. But the gap was there, a narrow corridor Ghost Runner promised. Thorne allowed a tight smile. Plot the breach. We hit them where it hurts, cargo bays first. As they accelerated toward the fray, the bridge crew exchanged glances. A silent pact forged in the heat of survival. The Council's demand had been tribute. Now they'd deliver something sharper. Thorne gripped the armrests as the Ghost Runner shuddered through the debris field's narrow corridor. The vice-like squeeze of tumbling rocks closing in. Alarms blared. Proximity warnings from the Council's cruisers, their sensor ghosts flickering on the holo display. Voss's hands danced over the controls, weaving the ship between twisted hulks of old mining rigs, relics from the system's abandoned boom. They're locking on, Patel reported, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. She patched in auxiliary power to the point defense guns, the turrets whining to life. 2 bogies inbound flanking our 6. Roll us port, Thorne ordered, eyes fixed on the scan. Give Patel a clear shot. We punch through before they box us. The ship banked hard, inertial dampers straining, and Patel fired in controlled bursts. Plasma lanced out, catching the lead interceptor's wing, shearing it clean. The alien craft spun wildly, trailing vapor, but its partner pressed the attack, missiles streaking hot. Voss jinked them sideways, a derelict asteroid shearing off a chunk of their aft shield. Sparks flew from a console. A junior tech yelped, slapping at the panel. Shields at 60%, rerouting now. Thorne leaned forward. The cargo bays of the lead cruiser loomed ahead, weakly guarded hatches promising vulnerability. Target those bays. Blow the locks and their tribute hull goes up with them. Patel nodded, her fingers a blur. Firing torpedoes, make it count. The volley struck true, breaching the outer hull. Explosions bloomed silent in the void, venting atmosphere and scattering cargo pods like confetti. The cruiser listed, its enforcer escorts breaking formation to assist, creating the sliver they needed. But retaliation came swift. A beam from the second cruiser grazed the Ghost Runner's hull, buckling a section of the engineering deck. The deck lurched beneath them. Over comms, the engineer's voice crackled. Hull breach in Sector 4, sealing it, but we're venting plasma. Compensate, Voss snapped, her caution yielding to grit. She overrode safeties, pushing the engines into redline. The ship surged, but the strain showed. Vibrations rattling teeth, lights flickering. Thorne's mind raced. The plan had been clean, hit and fade. Now, with shields failing and interceptors regrouping, they were exposed. Patel, draw their fire. Voss, plot an evasion, use the debris as cover. Patel unleashed a barrage, buying seconds while Voss slalomed them deeper into the field. A near miss rocked them. Shrapnel pinged off the hull like hail. In the chaos, Thorne spotted it. A forgotten relay station, half buried in rock, its old comm array still humming faintly. "Interface with that station," he said, the idea sparking. Humans had built these outposts, wired them with backdoor protocols the Council never bothered to scrub. Flood their net with junk data, ghost signatures, false targets. Patel patched in, her wit flashing through tension. Old Earth trick, spam the spammers. Uploading now. The station lit up, broadcasting phantom fleets across the Council's frequencies. Interceptors veered off, chasing illusions while the cruisers' locks scattered. The Ghost Runner slipped the noose, accelerating toward open space. But the cost lingered. A slow leak in engineering, the faint hiss of escaping air over comms. Voss glanced back, her expression hard. "We're through, but she's limping." Thorne exhaled, the bridge settling into uneasy quiet. The Council's tribute fleet burned behind them, a pyre of their own making. They had struck back, but the void ahead whispered of harder fights to come. Thorne gripped the armrests as the Ghost Runner's engines thrummed unevenly. The slow leak in engineering turning every vibration into a reminder of their fragility. Voss stood at the helm, her fingers dancing over the controls, coaxing more speed from the battered ship. "Patel, status on that patch?" Thorne barked, his voice cutting through the hum of alarms. "Working it," Patel replied from below, her words clipped over the intercom. Tools clanged in the background, a rhythmic protest against the hissing breach. "Hull's holding, but if we hit another grav well, it'll tear wide open. We need a dock. Real one, not some asteroid pit stop." The view screen flickered with star streaks, the Council's pyre fading to a distant spark. But sensors pinged, a lone interceptor, not chasing ghosts anymore, vectoring in from the flank. It must have broken through the spam, its engines flaring hot against the black. Voss cursed under her breath, a rare crack in her stoic facade. "They're locking on. Point defense?" Thorne nodded, already keying the turrets. "Fire at will." Bursts of plasma lanced out, missing the agile foe by meters. The interceptor danced closer, its weapons priming with a predatory glow. Stakes climbed fast, no backup, no illusions left to deploy. Patel burst onto the bridge, grease-streaked and breathing hard. "Can't seal it from here? Need to vent the compartment manually. Lose half our power reserves." Her eyes met Thorne's, the weight of the choice hanging. Cautious by nature, she hated gambles, but her hands steadied on the console. "Do it," Voss ordered, swerving the ship into a tight roll. The maneuver bought seconds, but the interceptor's beam grazed their shields, sparks erupting across the deck. Alarms wailed louder, red lights painting their faces in urgency. Thorne leaned forward, mind racing through old spacer tales, human grit against alien precision. Patel rigged the vent with a feedback loop. "When it opens, pulse the engine's reverse. It'll slingshot us toward that nebula, hide our signature." She blinked, then grinned fiercely. "Crazy, but yeah. Old Earth ion trick. Overloads their scanners." She dove back to work, cables snapping under her grip. The interceptor closed, firing again. Voss jinked hard, the ship groaning as inertial dampers strained. Thorne manned the auxiliary guns, his shots clipping the enemy's wing. It spun but recovered, relentless. "Now," Patel's voice echoed. A shudder ripped through the Ghost Runner as the compartment vented, air and plasma blooming like a false explosion. Engines reversed in a brutal surge, flinging them into the nebula's swirling gases. The interceptor veered, sensors frying in the electromagnetic soup, its pursuit dissolving into chaos. They burst through the far side, the leak sealed at the price of dimmed lights and sluggish systems. Voss eased back, wiping sweat from her brow. "We're ghosts again, but that cost us. Next fight we'll be running on fumes." Thorne watched the nebula swallow their tail, the void ahead no kinder. Survival bought time, but the Council's reach stretched far. Thorne gripped the console as the Ghost Runner's hull groaned under the strain of their emergency burn. The nebula's tendrils clawed at the sensors, painting false echoes across the tactical display. Ghost ships that weren't there, luring them deeper into the haze. "Patel, we've got incoming signatures," Voss said, her fingers dancing over the controls. The engines whined, protesting the cold restart after their nebula dive. 3, maybe 4. Council's sniffers, fast bastards closing from grid 7. Patel leaned forward in the command seat, eyes narrowing at the flickering holoscreen. His jaw set, the scar along his cheek pulling tight. "How long until they lock us?" 2 minutes if we're lucky. Systems are still limping. That vent cost us half our power reserves." Voss glanced back, her voice steady but edged with the caution that had kept her alive through a dozen runs. We can't outrun them clean. Thorn's mind raced, tracing the nebula's currents from memory. The gas clouds weren't just cover. They were a labyrinth of plasma storms and magnetic eddies, unpredictable as a riptide. He'd studied the charts during downtime, mapping weak points where the interference peaked. We don't run, he said, the words coming sharper than intended. We use it. Dive into the core storm, it's frying everything electronic for clicks. They'll follow blind. Patel shot him a look, weighing the risk. Thorn wasn't the strategist, just the engineer who'd patched more hulls than most, but his grit had earned him a say. Bold, if we misjudge the eddies, we're scrap. Voss? She nodded, already plotting the vector. It's our shot. Strap in. This'll rattle your teeth. The ship lurched as Voss punched the thrusters, plunging them toward the storm's heart. Alarms blared, warning of overloads, but Thorn silenced them with a quick override. His hand steady on the jury-rigged panels. Sparks danced from a loose conduit, the air thick with ozone. Behind them, the sniffers closed in, their sleek forms cutting through the gas like knives. One fired a probing shot, the beam glancing off the Ghost Runner's flank and shearing away an antenna. The impact jolted Thorn against his harness, but he twisted to check the auxiliary guns, still hot from the last fight, ammo low but functional. They're gaining, Patel growled. Thorn armed the decoys. Make 'em think we're breaking apart. Thorn flipped the switches, launching a salvo of chaff and false beacons into the nebula. They bloomed like dying stars, scattering signatures that mimicked a failing drive core. The lead sniffer veered toward the bait, its weapons charging for the kill. But the storm hit first. Electromagnetic fury engulfed the Ghost Runner, screens whiting out in a cascade of static. Voss cursed under her breath, navigating by instruments alone, dead reckoning through the chaos. Holding course. 30 seconds to the eye. Thorn felt the deck plates vibrate as the eddies tugged at them, the ship bucking like a wild thing. One sniffer emerged from the interference too close, its targeting lights piercing the gloom. Patel barked an order and Thorn squeezed the triggers. The gun spat fire, rounds tearing into the enemy's underbelly. It exploded in a silent bloom, debris spiraling away. The other two broke off, sensors overwhelmed, their formations fracturing as the storm's pulse scrambled their links. Voss whooped once, short and fierce, as they cleared the worst of it. The nebula thinned ahead, stars piercing through like distant promises. Patel exhaled, slumping back. Good call, Thorn, but we're bleeding Atmo now. That hit cracked a seal. Thorn nodded, already eyeing the repair kits. The victory tasted like ash. They'd shaken the pursuit, but the Ghost Runner was a wounded beast and the Council's net was tightening. Out here, time was the real enemy. Patel gripped the armrest as the Ghost Runner's hull groaned, the makeshift patch on the Atmo seal hissing faintly under strain. Alarms flickered on the console, red warnings dancing like fireflies in the dim bridge light. Voss wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over the auxiliary controls. Pressure's holding at 60%, Captain, but if we push the engines harder, that crack spreads like a bad joke. Thorn leaned in from the co-pilot's seat, her eyes narrowing at the scanner readouts. The nebula's fringes gave way to open void, but the Council's signatures lingered on the edge of detection. 3 cruisers, vectors adjusting, closing the noose. They're regrouping, she said, voice steady but edged with grit. We bought time, not escape. Options? Patel rubbed his chin, the stubble rough against his palm. The air recyclers hummed louder, pulling in the metallic tang of recycled oxygen, a reminder of how thin their margin had become. He traced the nav chart with a finger, plotting vectors that skirted asteroid fields and pulsar wakes. We can't outrun them clean. Fuel's down to reserves, and that seals a ticking clock. Voss, what's the status on the cargo bay mods? Voss snorted, not looking up. Rigged the tribute crates into decoys, hollow emitters and chaff launchers. It'll spoof their scans for maybe 10 minutes if we dump 'em right. But it'll leave us light, and those bastards might wise up fast. The ship shuddered as a micrometeor skimmed the shields, sparks flaring outside the viewport. Thorn's hand hovered over the weapons panel, but she pulled back. Save the ammo. If we fight, it's over. We improvise, use the debris field from that wreck we passed. Slingshot around it, launch the decoys in our wake, make 'em think we're breaking toward the outer rim. Patel nodded, the plan clicking into place like a well-oiled lock. Human tricks born of desperation and duct tape ingenuity. Do it, Thorn, plot the course. Voss, prep the launch sequence. And kill those alarms, I need quiet to think. They moved as one, the bridge alive with the snap of switches and murmured confirmations. The Ghost Runner banked hard, thrusters firing in short bursts to weave through the scattered hulks of an ancient battleground. Twisted metal loomed in the scanners, relics from some long-forgotten war, now their shield. Patel watched the cruiser's icons swell on the display, their formation tightening like predators scenting blood. "Decoys away," Voss announced, his voice tight. The ship jolted as the crates ejected, blooming into false signatures, ghost ships scattering in every direction. Hollow projections flickered to life, mimicking engine flares and comm chatter, a chorus of digital lies. For a heartbeat, the Council's pursuit fractured. 2 cruisers veered toward the decoys, weapons hot, while the third held course, its sensors probing deeper. Thorne's jaw clenched. They're not all buying it. That lead ship's got upgraded arrays, it's cutting through the noise. The Atmoseal chose that moment to protest, a sharp crack echoing through the vents. Frost rhymed the bulkhead and Patel's breath fogged briefly. "Reroute power to the patch. Thorne, evasive pattern Delta. Hug the debris tight." She complied, the ship twisting through a gauntlet of wreckage, proximity alerts blaring. A chunk of hull plating clipped their flank, shearing off a sensor array in a shower of sparks. Voss cursed under his breath, patching the feed manually. Lost long range. We're flying blind on their flank now. Tension coiled in Patel's gut, the weight of command pressing like the thinning air. The lead cruiser loomed larger, its beam weapons charging with a telltale hum transmitted through the comms. They were cornered, the nebula's promise of stars mocking their flight. But surrender wasn't in the blood. "Thorne," Patel said, his voice low and sure. "Time for the crazy part. Vent the auxiliary tanks, fake a core breach. It'll draw their fire while we flip and burn for the pulsar gap." Her eyes met his, a flash of understanding passing between them. Risky, but yeah, let's make 'em bleed for it. Voss initiated the sequence, false alarms wailing as simulated radiation spiked across their hull. The cruiser fired, lancing beams into the void where the Ghost Runner should have been. They rolled inverted, engines roaring to life in a desperate sprint. The pulsar loomed ahead, its radiation a deadly gamble that would scramble trackers but fry their systems if they lingered. The seal held, just. Alarms peaked and died as they cleared the debris, the Council's icons falling behind in the scanner's haze. Voss let out a ragged breath. "We did it. They're scattering to chase ghosts." Patel allowed himself a grim smile, the ship steadying into the void. But the cost lingered in the flickering lights and the chill seeping through the decks. Victory for now, but the hunt was far from over. Voss gripped the armrests as the Ghost Runner's hull groaned against the pull of the nearest debris field, the ship's battered frame protesting every maneuver. Patel's hands danced over the console, rerouting power from non-essentials to the thrusters, his face lit by the erratic glow of warning panels. "We've got incoming signatures, 3 more Council interceptors vectoring from the outer rim. They're not buying the pulsar decoy." Behind them, Lena patched the comms array, her fingers smudged with coolant residue, voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. "Shields at 30%. If we push for the nebula, we might lose life support en route." She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but now her eyes flicked to Voss with a rare spark of resolve. The scanner pinged relentlessly, painting the void with red threats closing in like wolves on a wounded prey. Voss leaned forward, studying the holographic display where the Council's formation tightened. They had demanded tribute from the fringe colonies, Unity guys under bare, stripped resources. But the Ghost Runner carried proof of their corruption, data crystals that could shatter their grip. No more running blind. It was time to turn the tables. "Divert auxiliary power to the forward arrays," Voss ordered, his voice cutting through the hum of straining engines. "Lena, sync the false signatures with our actual trajectory. Make it look like we're splitting into multiples." Patel shot him a glance, eyebrows raised but complied without a word, the witty edge in his usual banter silenced by the stakes. The ship shuddered as they unleashed the ploy, holographic emitters blooming deceptive blips across the scanner, mimicking a desperate fleet scattering into the nebula's swirling gases. The lead interceptor veered sharply, its beams slicing empty space while the others hesitated, their commanders barking confused queries over open channels. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she fine-tuned the illusion, the nebula's interference amplifying the chaos. But one interceptor broke through the ruse, its engines flaring hot as it locked on. Alarms wailed anew, the hull vibrating from proximity fire that grazed their flank, shearing off an external sensor pod in a spray of sparks. "Direct hit incoming!" Patel yelled, yanking the yoke. Voss braced, the cost hitting home. The pod's loss meant no more long-range scans, leaving them half-blind in the fight. In that heartbeat, ingenuity sparked. "Reverse the waste vents," Voss said, the idea crystallizing from scraps of spacer lore. "Flood their sensors with our exhaust plasma. Turn their lock into a ghost." Patel's grim smile returned, fingers flying to execute. Lena nodded, rerouting the systems with a muttered, "Crazy, but it might work." The vents erupted, spewing ionized plasma that bloomed like a false supernova, scrambling the interceptor's targeting arrays in a haze of electromagnetic fury. The enemy ship fired wild, bolts careening harmlessly into the nebula, while the Ghost Runner slipped through the gap, engines whispering as they dove deeper into the gas clouds. The other interceptors faltered, their formation fracturing as confusion spread. Voss watched the signatures fade, the Council's vaunted precision crumbling under human grit. But the nebula's radiation clawed at their systems, lights dimming, air recyclers wheezing with the chill of overtaxed filters. They emerged on the far side, the void stretching clear, no pursuit in sight. Lena slumped back, exhaling. "Data secure. We can reach the Alliance relay in 12 hours. Patel steadied the course, the ship limping but unbroken. Voss met their eyes, the weight of the tribute's shadow lifting, replaced by the fire of Retribution's promise. "The hunt ended here,"